My wife left my critically ill mother alone at home just to go on a trip with her lover. When I got home, I found my mother dead in the living room, her body already stiff. I checked the location tracking and kicked open the door of the homestay. My wife pretended to be calm. "What's wrong with you?" "We're just traveling together with the child." With bloodshot eyes, I forced them into the car. "Fine, let me show you my way of traveling." 01. On the third floor of the homestay, I kicked the door repeatedly. The staff nearby were hopping with anxiety, but none dared to stop me. The fifth knock finally made the door open from inside. I couldn't stop my momentum and stumbled in. At first glance, I saw my wife holding a picture book with our son in her arms on the sofa. She asked impatiently, "What's wrong with you?" I stared at her disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes. To my left was a kettle. Before anyone could react, I grabbed it and swung it hard at the person beside me. The staff outside the door screamed and scattered as the boiling water poured over Pat. Dazed from the blow, Pat slumped against the cabinet door, clutching his head and hissing in pain. I walked to the door, glared fiercely outside, and said, "Handling family business." Then I slammed the door shut, grabbed Pat by the collar, dragged him inside, and threw him onto the bed. He threw a punch at my face, struggling to sit up from the bed. But I was 10 centimeters taller and 30 pounds heavier than him. With just one punch, his eyes rolled back, and he curled up, unable to even whimper. I took out the duct tape I had prepared earlier from my backpack and quickly bound them up, sealing their mouths shut. Sophia, holding her son in her arms, shouted at me from a distance, "What are you doing?" Rage surged in my chest, and I slapped her across the face with the back of my hand. "Shut up." My voice cut off Sophia's words before they could even leave her throat. Her gaze at me finally carried a hint of terror. I glanced around the room. 2 suitcases lay on the floor, and beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows stretched the sea, a rather romantic setting. Witnessing this sudden upheaval, our son Simon began wailing uncontrollably at the top of his lungs. Sophia hurried to comfort Simon. After all, he was just a 3-year-old child. After a few words, tears welled up his eyes as he looked at me pitifully. Suppressing the softness in my heart, I forced myself to look away. Pat on the bed began to squirm, making muffled noises. Sophia said timidly, "Julian, you must have misunderstood." She frantically explained, "I just took Simon out to play, and you were busy, so I asked Pat to come along. It's just traveling together." What a way to travel together. My eyes were bloodshot. "Do you even know that my mother died at home?" The body's already stiff. The moment I spoke, Sophia's face turned pale. She panicked and said, "How could that be? I left food in the fridge. All she had to do was microwave it." Under my ferocious glare, tears welled up in her eyes, and the words that followed stuck in her throat. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. 2 pillows lay side by side on the bed, with a charging cable connected to one side. I could almost picture them cuddling and kissing on the same bed. Sophia reached out to pull me with trembling hands, but after I shook her off twice, she simply knelt down. Trust me, I had no idea. I thought it would be fine. Mom had been recovering so well before. I nearly wanted to kill her. She was discharged just 2 weeks after her heart attack. I said we should hire a nurse, but you refused. When the company sent me for closed-door training, you swore you'd take care of her. Is this how you took care of her? Sophia cried out. Yes, Mom must have had another heart attack. It's a sudden illness, an accident. There was nothing I could do even if I were home. I didn't want to argue with her any further. I bent down and looked at them both. What I'm about to say, I'll only say once. They both nodded eagerly. I said, "You're coming with me. Stay quiet." The car's parked in the west lot. They exchanged glances. I sneered. "You could try to run." I opened my phone and pulled up the video I had just received. It showed Pat's father accompanying his mother on a walk. As long as you can bear the consequences. 03. The door opened, and I walked out carrying Simon. The staff in the hallway averted their gazes one after another. Our group wore expressions of an eerie calm. No matter how Sophia tried to stall for time, it took only 5 or 6 minutes to reach the parking lot. I commanded Pat, "Move the cardboard box from the car to the trunk." Pat clenched his jaw, yanked open the back door, grabbed the box, and forcefully kicked the door shut with his foot. I quickly handed Simon to Sophia, and as Pat set down the box, immediately pulled out the stun baton and pressed it hard against his lower back. Then, with the prepared iron chains, I swiftly bound his hands behind his back and threw him into the trunk. Turning around, Sophia hugged Simon, trembling as she prepared to run. In a few strides, I caught up with her, grabbed her by the hair, covered her mouth, and shoved her into the passenger seat. A child can't handle a shock. Do you want Simon to experience it too? She pleaded with her eyes. Don't. I whispered. Then you have to behave. Leaving the parking lot, I headed straight for the highway. Sophia sobbed. Where are you taking me? I watched her through the rearview mirror. I truly despise her kind, rotten to the core, yet putting on such an innocent facade. I said, you both love traveling, don't you? Let me show you my way of touring. A dull thud echoed from the trunk. Sophia tentatively said, you won't make it past the highway checkpoint like this. I didn't respond, just slammed on the brakes twice. With a thud, the trunk fell silent. Simon started wailing loudly, his lips quivering. He'd never seen me like this before, now waving his little hands and crying out repeatedly, Daddy, Daddy. I kept driving while watching for the nearest emergency stopping area, where I finally pulled over. I stepped out of the driver's seat and opened the trunk, where Pat stared at me with sweat pouring down his face. This time, I pressed the stun gun against his neck. A noise came from the front of the car. My heart skipped a beat as I quickly shut the trunk and rushed back. Sophia had climbed from the back seat into the driver's area and was trying to start the car. Seeing me appear, she burst into terrified tears. "What the hell do you want?" Though trembling with fear, she still managed to raise her voice sharply. "Don't think you can do whatever you want. There are surveillance cameras everywhere. You won't get away with this." I dragged her out of the car, and this time, shoved her into the passenger seat. Beneath the seatbelt, I wound the rope around her waist 4 or 5 times. Sophia pleaded again. "Let me sit in the back. I'll keep Simon company, okay? He's in his car seat. He doesn't need company." She said again, "I need to use the bathroom. I need to pee." I shut the car door. "Pee. I don't mind the smell." The car started moving. Sophia banged her head against the window. "What the hell are you doing? Pat and I grew up together. I just asked him to stay with us for a few days. Please, Julian, I beg you, think about Simon." Hearing her words, I felt a surge of fury burning between my eyebrows. I couldn't help but slam my palm against the steering wheel, and the car let out an angry, piercing honk. I asked through gritted teeth, "Sophia, think carefully before you speak. Simon, is that my son?" 04. I sped all the way, covering the 267-kilometer distance in just an hour and a half. Sophia muttered distractedly in a daze. I didn't hear a single word. The car finally stopped in front of an old house in the mountains. I commanded Sophia, "Take Simon inside." I then took out the folding cart and threw Pat onto it. When we reached the main hall, I dropped Pat and dragged Sophia into the room on the right. In the center of the room, 2 wooden chairs had been nailed together. I chained her feet directly to one of them. Turning around, I threw Pat onto the other chair and bound him tightly from head to toe with iron chains. After handling all this, I sat down across from them. Sophia looked at me, her makeup streaked with tear tracks. Simon woke up, struggled to get down, and ran to the window to play by throwing stones. Sophia suddenly laughed. "Honey, can you just calm down?" I remained silent, staring at them expressionlessly. She pleaded, "If you're angry, just hit me. You should think about." I waited for her to slowly gather her words. After a long pause, she said with a tearful face, "You should think about Mom. She wouldn't want to see you breaking the law." I opened my phone and shoved the screen right in front of her eyes. I asked word by word, "Sophia, do you think my mother still needs me to miss her?" Sophia stared blankly at the phone, panicking as she asked, "What is this?" She couldn't bear to look directly at it, because the photo on the phone showed my mother lying on the living room floor with a ghastly gray face, her mouth agape, as if silently calling for help. Sophia closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face in a messy flood. She knew that no matter what she said or did now, it could ignite my towering rage. That was the mother who gave birth to me and raised me. I left with repeated instructions, telling Sophia to make sure she kept a close eye on her condition. After the closed-door training ended, Sophia's phone remained switched off. I called my in-laws to ask if she had gone home, but they were evasive. By the time I rushed back, it was already an eternal farewell to my mother. The doctor told me it was another heart attack. He advised me, "It's very difficult to save her. You need to prepare yourself." I should have been able to understand this natural cycle of life and death. If only the doctor hadn't told me my mother's time of death was 2 days ago. If I hadn't overheard my in-laws' conversation, my father-in-law said, "You insisted on letting her have the baby," and I agreed. Now she's out with Patrick and the child while her mother-in-law died alone at home. "Aren't you afraid Julian will find out?" My mother-in-law defended. "Julian is simple-minded. It'll be fine. She just wants Simon to bond with Patrick. After all, he's the biological father. If none of this had happened, perhaps I could have let it go." At this moment, amidst Sophia's sobs, I remained eerily calm. "Come, confess everything to me, just like I did. Let me hear whether you deserve forgiveness." 05. I opened my backpack and took out a utility knife and a long awl. "Think carefully before you lie. Can you bear the consequences?" Sophia stared at me in terror, her tears having long dried up. A pale yellow liquid soon seeped from beneath her, trickling through the chair's crevices onto the floor. Mortified, she tried tugging at her clothes to cover the traces below, but the smell had already spread uncontrollably. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my leg. Looking down, I saw Simon frowning as he hit me. "Don't be mean to Mommy." He was defending Sophia, just like I used to defend my mother when I was little. Simon must have sensed a hint of danger. He looked at Sophia, then at me. "Daddy, you're being too scary." I lowered my eyelids and let him hit me for a while, then took out a bottle of water from my bag along with a white pill. I poured out most of the water, leaving just a little at the bottom, then broke the pill in half and dropped one piece into it. I shook the water bottle and waved him over. "Simon, come drink some water." Sophia screamed hysterically. "What are you giving him?" "Simon, don't drink it. Don't drink it." The child looked bewildered, momentarily unsure whether to listen to me or his mother. I picked him up and forced the water bottle into his mouth. "Too easy, just a piece of cake." Sophia frantically tried to stand up, but her legs were chained tightly to the heavy wooden chair. Before she could take even a single step, she collapsed face first on the floor. I carried Simon outside, but after just 3 or 5 laps around, the little one in my arms couldn't resist dozing off. When I returned to the house, Sophia was sprawled on the floor, struggling endlessly to get up. At the sound of footsteps, she lifted her head. Seeing my empty arms, she asked in terror, "Where's Simon? What have you done to Simon?" Setting aside past grievances, I picked her up and fetched another rope, binding her upper body to the chair as well. She was shaking her body desperately the entire time. So even someone as selfish as her has someone she truly cares about. Come on, let's continue. Sophia glared at me with hatred. "If you don't bring Simon back, I won't say a single word." I looked at her and couldn't help but laugh. "If you don't talk, Simon might really get hurt." Sophia instantly went berserk. "You're insane, a complete lunatic. No wonder your father abandoned you. No wonder your mother." At this point, she suddenly stopped speaking. With a twisted expression, I stepped closer and punched her in the side of the face. "What the hell were you going to say about my mom, huh?" This long-forgotten, dilapidated house still contained many old pieces of furniture. I casually picked up a chair and smashed it down hard across her back. "Sophia, you'd better behave." Striding back to the edge, I picked up the utility knife. "I don't care, but you're different. You have a son, parents, and this worthless life of yours. Calculate the cost yourself. Speak up or stay silent." Sophia slumped weakly against the back of the chair. Her expression had gone beyond fear. I could see she was utterly terrified. Through tears, she asked, "What do you want me to say?" I tapped the blade against her face. "One thing at a time," I said. "First, tell me, when did Pat find out Simon was his kid?" 06. I took out her phone and turned it on, warning, one lie, one stab. She sobbed and mumbled incoherently. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I slowly turned the knife in my hand, explained clearly. She squeezed her eyes shut tightly and took a deep breath. "I knew from the very beginning. I knew when I was pregnant." I opened her cloud photo album and found the timeline of her pregnancy. Before me appeared many photos I'd never seen before. There were pictures of Pat caressing her belly, intimate selfies of the two of them, photos of Pat grinning from ear to ear while holding newborn Simon. With a dark expression, I scrolled through the seemingly endless album. "When did you two start seeing each other?" Back when I first met Sophia, she was the pampered daughter of my boss, while I was a promising mid-level manager with bright career prospects. My boss said, "This daughter of mine, she's been delicate since childhood and is currently single. A reliable young man like you would be the perfect match." I had my hesitations, but soon fell deeply in love under Sophia's direct and passionate pursuit. Before we got married, my mother had expressed her concerns. "Marrying above your station won't make for an easy life." But Sophia's eyes sparkled as she looked at me, saying she loved me. When we exchanged rings, I choked up and said, "I'll love you for the rest of my life." I kept my word. Over these years, I obeyed her every command and devoted myself wholeheartedly to the company. I didn't even know how much money I had, because I gave everything to her. I gritted my teeth and pressed on. When did the two of you get together?" Sophia fell silent. She turned her head away, gazing at Pat, who was still unconscious, her eyes filled with countless emotions. I roared, "Speak. When did you two get together?" Sophia turned her head, her eyes red, and said, "When? I've been with him since childhood. I've only ever been with him." She glared at me with hatred. "It was you who ingratiated yourself with my father to become a live-in son-in-law. You only married me for money in the first place. How dare you argue with me about this?" Everything suddenly made sense in my mind, and I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "You father and daughter pair. One used me as a knife to kill with borrowed hands. The other used me as a bridge to cross the river, then tore it down. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant." I walked up to the two of them, looked from left to right, then raised my hand and plunged the knife straight into Pat's shoulder. When I pulled the knife out, Pat groaned and finally woke up. The blade was dripping with blood, so I wiped it clean on Sophia's face with a backhanded motion. "Even now, you still don't realize your mistake." Sophia's teeth chattered. "Your mother was sick. It's not my fault she died. How can you blame all of this on me? Even if I had been home, what could?" I didn't want to listen to her keep nagging, so I directly wrapped 2 loops of tape around her mouth. I stared into her eyes and said earnestly, "Sophia, that's not how you calculate it. My mother could die, but she shouldn't have died alone at home with no one caring. What the hell do you think you are? Do you think it's okay for my mother to die like this?" 07. Blood had already soaked most of Pat's upper body clothes. His eyes struggled to stay open as he tried to focus ahead, his head swaying side to side like a pendulum before gradually regaining consciousness. I went to the wall and found a thick wooden table leg. Considering the kneecap was too hard, I aimed for his shin and struck down with all my might. The excruciating pain tore through him, forcing out a blood-curdling scream. Beside us, Sophia rocked violently in her chair, straining to inch closer to him. Such profound devotion. How touching. I grabbed Pat's hair, adjusted his face with my other hand, and slapped him hard. "Keep screaming, and I'll break your other leg too." Hearing this, he clenched his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead, glaring at me furiously. I smiled. "Just now, she's already said plenty. Now it's your turn." Pat turned his head to look at Sophia. The latter wore a numb expression, having lost all will to resist. Pat asked, "What do you want me to say?" I asked, "Was it you who pulled strings to arrange my business trip?" He shut his mouth and refused to speak. Smiling, I turned around, this time pressing the knife against Sophia's chest. Panting heavily, Pat finally said after a long pause, "Samuel, I had Samuel arrange it." I nodded. "You deliberately sent me away, just so you could celebrate Simon's 3rd birthday together?" Pat remained silent. I pulled out an early pregnancy test slip. Before this, I thought it was a surprise Sophia had left for me. Gritting his teeth, he pressed on, "Is the child in her belly yours too?" Pat averted his gaze. I walked over step by step, consumed by guilt. It's all my fault for overestimating myself and marrying such a wife, which ultimately left my mother to pass away alone in misery, with no one to see her off. I grabbed him by the throat. "If it weren't for your actions, my mother wouldn't have died alone at home with no one to care for her." He suddenly broke down, sobbing, "We didn't mean to. We want to hurt anyone. We just want to take Simon out for some fun. How are we supposed to know your mom would end up like this? Look, they've turned out to be the innocent ones." I sneered coldly, looking up. "So, what you're saying is, it's all because my mother had bad luck." "Let me think. Your mother, didn't she have a heart condition? Couldn't handle shocks, right?" Pat froze for a moment before snapping back to reality, shouting in fury, "Julian, if you've got the guts, come at me. What kind of man targets my mother? You bastard son of a bitch." I raised my hand and punched him hard in the face. With all my strength, I shoved Pat backward, sending him crashing to the floor along with the chair, Sophia and her chair toppling over in the same violent motion. I looked down at them from above. "What's the point in coming after you? What I have suffered, you shall suffer as well. Now this is interesting. 08, I have a lot to do. First, turn on the camera to check the activity inside the villa. My in-laws were still tied to the sofa, just as immobile as the day I left them. I shouted through the intercom, "I've got good news for you. I found Sophia." Hearing the sound, they froze for a moment before immediately struggling violently. I added, "Let me give you another piece of bad news. Sophia isn't very safe right now." My father-in-law kept groaning in the direction of the camera. I placed the phone next to Sophia's ear and tore the tape off her mouth. "Speak," I ordered. Sophia lay on the ground, her feet higher than her head, sobbing as she cried out, "Dad, Mom." I immediately stood up. "Did you hear that clearly?" My mother-in-law was in tears, trying to move toward the door, but the solid wood sofa was far too heavy for her to budge. I said politely, "We're all family here, so I'll give you a choice. The longer you stay quiet, the longer Sophia remains safe. How about that?" Hearing my words, my in-laws exchanged glances and immediately sat back down obediently. My mother-in-law's sobs kept coming, but she didn't dare move a muscle. I turned off the microphone and walked over to Sophia once more. Tears streamed directly from the corners of her eyes and her hair, snot smeared across half her face. None of her usual meticulously maintained appearance remained. She didn't dare look at me, yet had nowhere to escape, so she could only squeeze her eyes shut and turn her face away, as if this could keep me at a distance. I was clearly dizzy from blood loss. He gasped intermittently, "The police will find you." I straightened my collar and helped him up again. "The police will come, of course, sooner or later." He had me suspiciously. I thought for a moment, they'll come, and then what? Circling them slowly, I analyzed each point one by one. They came and saw 2 corpses. I knelt on the ground without resisting. They took me back to the police station. This was a major case, with clear conflict and intense public reaction. I might get the death penalty, but it doesn't matter. Dragging you 2 down with me, I'm not losing out. Or maybe I won't get the death penalty. At most, I'll be out again after a dozen or so years. Was Simon grown up by then? Sophia let out a mournful whimper in her throat. Pat stared at me in disbelief. "You're insane. You're completely insane." I nodded in agreement. How could I not be? Mom died so horribly, and the son was born from my wife's affair. Who wouldn't go mad? Suddenly, I became curious. What would it take to drive you 2 insane? The more I thought about it, the more thrilling it became. I propped my phone on the table and turned on the recording mode. Sophia asked, "What are you going to do? Don't you dare record this." I fantasized. If what you've done were exposed to the public, would you lose your minds? I watched with satisfaction as Sophia's contorted face appeared on the screen, waving a hand in front of the camera. "My name is Julian. The 2 people behind me. The woman is my wife, Sophia. The man is what she calls her travel buddy. But in reality, he's her lover, Pat. Next, they will confess to everyone how they carried on their affair and destroyed an ordinary person's life." With that, I stepped back. Carrying the still sleeping Simon from the main room, I returned to the chair by the phone and gently pressed the knife blade against his neck. I said, "Start from the beginning. 09, back in my student days, I came across a line while reading. People are nothing but cardboard masks. Today is the day I tear off their masks. I once thought I was winning at life. With a respectable job, an outstanding wife, an adorable child. I had a loving family and could still care for my elderly, ailing mother. I never imagined that all of this was built upon the deception of those closest to me. Under my coercion, Sophia began to stammer out her story. She said she and Pat had been in a relationship since they were 14. Pat's father was Sophia's father's chauffeur. She and Pat grew up together since childhood, never realizing that while the two families appeared inseparable on the surface, there was an inherent chasm between them. When their relationship was discovered by the elders, Sophia's father flew into a rage. He believed it was nothing more than a lowly boy deliberately seducing his precious daughter. Left with no choice, they took their romance from the open into secrecy. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. After graduating from university, I joined the Sue family's business. Sophia's father grew increasingly satisfied with me. I was a graduate of a prestigious university, reasonably handsome, and came from a simple family background. Most importantly, when I first saw Sophia at the annual meeting, I was visibly stunned by her beauty. Sophia was instructed to make contact with me. She wanted to resist, but her father said, "Don't think I don't know about you and that boy Pat. Julian is an outstanding young man. His family background is simple, and he's easy to handle. You can either develop something with him, or I'll fire Pat's father. The choice is yours." At that time, Pat's mother had a chronic illness requiring extremely expensive medical treatments every month. If his father lost his job, they wouldn't be able to survive. At this point, she was already sobbing uncontrollably. Pat took a deep breath and continued speaking. After learning about this matter, he agonized over it, but ultimately made the painful decision to break up with Sophia. But as Sophia and I grew closer, he became increasingly tormented and regretful. 6 months after our wedding, I returned to my hometown to visit my mother. Sophia came back to our home from her parents' house, with Pat driving her. That was the day they rekindled their relationship, and from then on, things spiraled out of control. When Sophia got pregnant, he was scared too, but they discovered that I hadn't shown the slightest suspicion. They then conceived the delusion that if they couldn't live together as husband and wife, they could at least have a child together. Pat said they also felt guilty toward me. So afterward, they tried their best to avoid being alone together. This time, they truly just wanted to celebrate Simon's birthday alone with him. They stared at me with eager eyes. Holding Simon in my arms, I burst into laughter. I asked, "Have you ever considered how this situation looks from my perspective? My parents divorced when I was young, and my mother endured countless hardships to put me through college. Because I did well, after graduation, I joined a highly reputable local company. After joining the company, the boss took a liking to me and actively set me up with his daughter. Fortunately, his daughter seemed interested in me too. Even more fortunately, she was exactly my type. I devoted myself wholeheartedly to a year-long relationship before getting married. The boss said he had to avoid favoritism and couldn't offer me significant promotions, which I understood. I worked in a position that didn't match my abilities, obeyed my wife's every wish, and cherished my son like the apple of my eye. The only thing that worried me was my mother. She had heart problems and had undergone 2 surgeries. I don't expect my mother to be cured. I just want her to pass away comfortably. But one day, the company informed me I had to attend a closed training session. My wife told me not to worry, saying she would take good care of my mother. When I finished the training, I discovered my mother had been dead at home for 2 days, and no one even knew. As for my wife and child, they were completely unreachable. The only trace was in her lover's social media posts, flaunting photos of their happy family of 3. At that moment, I overheard my in-laws talking. Turns out that child was actually the lover's. Don't you find it ridiculous? Everything I treasured turned out to be fabricated by others. And for these lies, I even sacrificed my mother's life. 10. I put Simon down. Picking up the phone again, Sophia pleaded, "Could you please take Simon to the hospital?" He knew nothing about this. Pat could barely keep his eyes open from excessive blood loss. "Just kill me. I'll pay with my life. Let them go." The 15-minute video was divided into 3 segments by me. WeChat moments, every group chat, all social media accounts. I sent out through all 3 of their phones. As Sophia watched me continuously operating her phone, she instinctively asked, "What are you doing?" I smiled faintly and said earnestly, "Do you know what kind of thing in this world most easily grabs people's attention?" Both of them stared at me in stunned silence. I kindly explained, "It's always marital discord, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law feuds, or a man being cuckolded. So, your affair that produced a bastard child, leading to your mother-in-law dying without anyone to bury her. That will hit everyone's sweet spot for scandal." At my words, their eyes widened in terror. Sophia screamed, "You can't do this! You can't do this!" Pat struggled to his feet, straining his neck toward me. "Don't use my phone to send that," he growled. I had no patience for their howling and sealed their mouths with tape again. The video I sent out immediately received feedback. After an initial 2 minutes of silence, our phone started ringing incessantly. The frequency and intensity of a notification sounds told me this matter was even more shocking than I had anticipated. In my university classmates group chat, a string of question marks flooded my phone. I didn't answer the squad leader's call. He sent another message. "Julian, you must stay calm. Making them live with shame is the greatest punishment for them." My vision gradually blurred. Turning off my phone, I asked, why do you always dare to act, but never dare to take responsibility? I asked Pat, if you had insisted back then, at worst your father would have been unemployed for 2 or 3 years. If you worked harder and she saved more, your mother's medical expenses wouldn't have fallen short. As long as you were willing to endure, do you really think her family would have watched you suffer in poverty? I then asked Sophia, if you had cried and threatened to kill yourself, do you really think your father would have let you die? They scrambled to whimper, clearly eager to offer many excuses. But I wasn't interested. I just shoved them back into the car. Simon and Sophia sat in the back, while Pat was tied up in the passenger seat. Starting the engine again, I kindly reminded them, I don't want your lives at all, but you'll have to sit quietly in the car. I'm a driver. A slight tremble in my hands or a loose foot on the highway could mean anything. After all, I'm alone in this world, but you're different. After these words, the two sat obediently without a peep. I kept driving straight home. For hours later, I entered the city limits. After Simon woke up, he cried about being hungry for a while. When he saw I wasn't paying attention, he started throwing a tantrum. After crying for some time, he dozed off again in a daze. I checked the time, 9:20 p.m. Sophia and Pat had been taken by me from the homestay for nearly 12 hours. My in-laws had been tied up for 51 hours. My mother had been dead for 67 hours. I drove the car to the entrance of the police station, turned off the engine, and got out. The officer on duty looked at me warily. You can't park here. I raised my hands. I'm here to turn myself in. 11. The police cautiously checked the situation inside the car and immediately pinned me to the ground with a long baton. The police helped them out of the car, and as soon as the tape was ripped from Pat's mouth, he screamed, "Arrest him! Execute him!" Sophia immediately hugged Simon, glaring at me with hatred in the aftermath of the ordeal. I was handcuffed and taken into the interrogation room. The case was crystal clear. I confessed to everything. I suspect this must be considered a case with extraordinarily significant impact. Simon's background was exposed to the public. As for Sophia and Pat, will they stay together or separate in the years to come? And what about Sophia's parents? Having spoiled their daughter to such an extent, can these image-conscious people withstand the onslaught of public opinion? During my days in the detention center, I often found myself laughing out loud in the middle of the night, lost in thought. On the day of the trial, the lawyers argued until their mouths ran dry. Finally, the judge announced, Julian has violated the crimes of unlawful detention and intentional assault, but considering his voluntary surrender and the fact that his actions stem from extreme emotional anger and grief, which were not premeditated, after comprehensive deliberation, Julian is sentenced to a combined total of 3 years and 8 months in prison. Before being taken away, the lawyer looked at me, reform well, and strive for an early release. I said, thank you. I'll leave the rest to you. I entrusted my lawyer to file a lawsuit against Sophia. I demanded that she return the alimony, compensate for my emotional distress, and pay for the damage to my reputation. At the same time, I requested the court to formally establish my custody and visitation rights over Simon. I wanted nothing more than to demand a life for a life, but I knew death would be far too merciful for them. After being imprisoned, my squad leader came to visit me. He told me this case had garnered an extraordinary amount of attention. Sophia's identity became the talk of the town. The wealthy heiress casually toying with ordinary lives. Wherever she went, all eyes were on her. Sophia's father wanted to send her and Simon abroad, but this required consent from both parents. Since I was in prison, they didn't even bother asking me, so the plan was abandoned. Pat became the poster child for fortune hunters, with no one believing his relationship with Sophia was based on love. His mother had a heart attack over it and barely survived. Sophia brought up divorce with me, but things weren't as simple as she imagined. What I wanted ultimately came to pass. I want them to live, but never to live well again. The squad leader advised me to behave well and strive for an early sentence reduction. He said, what kind of person you are, at least all our classmates know. Even if you just open a small shop or do something, could you possibly starve to death? I smiled at him through the window. I know. I used to be a good person. 12. 2.5 years later, I was released from prison. After my release, I immediately gave an interview to the reporters. I said sincerely, at that time, the shock of my mother's death was too overwhelming, which led me to do wrong things. Through education, I have come to realize my mistakes and deeply regret the harm caused to my son. Although Simon is not my biological child, I raised him with all the love in my heart, and I miss him terribly. The reporter followed me to my in-laws' house. The elderly couple looked grim, but the lingering threat of public backlash against their business still weighed on them. Not daring to treat me too harshly in front of the cameras, they quickly called Sophia out instead. To my astonishment, it had only been a little over 2 years, yet she seemed to have become a completely different person. Though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed, I felt it deep in my heart. She had aged. Her back was even more hunched than mine, and I'd just been released from prison. I asked gently, "Where's Simon? I'd like to see the child." Sophia didn't dare come closer. Her lips trembled as she said, "Stay away. Don't you dare touch Simon." I stepped closer to her. "Sophia, don't be like this. I just missed the child. I am his father, after all." Sophia instantly flared up in anger. What kind of father are you? You're not blood related to him. I firmly held her shoulders. How am I not? Legally, he is my son. Then, I pulled her into a tight embrace. Calm down. People are filming. Getting too worked up won't be good for your family's company. At that moment, a child's voice came from outside. Mom, Grandma, I'm home. I turned around in surprise. Simon had grown taller, but I recognized that face instantly. I rushed over and picked him up. Sophia screamed. I spun Simon around twice. Son, did you miss Daddy? After a brief moment of panic, Simon looked at me confused. You're my dad? I said, yes. We can even be on the same household register. A reporter shouted from the side. Julian, look over here. I turned around and planted a heavy kiss on Simon's face. At this moment, the scene was profoundly meaningful. After the reporter left, my father-in-law pulled me aside for a talk. He said, Sophia wronged you. We wronged you. But they've learned their lesson. Name your price. Whatever is within my means, I'll agree to it. From now on, let's each live our own lives. I said, Dad, what are you talking about? All I want is my own wife and child. I stared at her disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes. I put away my smile and looked at her for a long time. So long that the room fell into complete silence. Only then did I say softly, how could it not matter? Sophia, legally, Simon will always be connected to me. Father-in-law slumped back in defeat. The nanny was upstairs watching cartoons with Simon, the child's laughter drifting down in waves. In the suffocating silence, that carefree joy ricocheted between us. The laughter grew nearer as Simon came barreling down the stairs like a whirlwind. He raised his right hand and placed it vertically across his outstretched left hand. Reciting a line from Ultraman, he declared, those who flee from battle will never see tomorrow.